swipe, right swipe.
He's cuddling a kitten.
Oh, wait a minute. Left swipe.
You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left.
Came across a photo of this green-eyed hottie. Whole nine, pretty face, tight waist, nice body. But I just couldn't overlook one small fact. She smokes like an old man at a racetrack.
You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left.
Hashtag.
I didn't think it was anything.
I had pain in my abdomen. It just wouldn't go away.
I was spotting, but I had already gone through menopause.
These symptoms may be nothing, but they could be early warning signs of a gynecologic cancer, such as cervical, ovarian, or uterine cancer.
Feeling bloated for no reason? That's what I remember.
Seeing my doctor probably saved my life.
Warning signs are not the same for everyone. If you think something's wrong, see your doctor, ask about gynecologic cancer, and get the inside knowledge.
Hi, I'm Candy Clark, Justice of the Peace, District 12 in Washington County, and I'm on public access.
Nope.
So are you.
Hi, welcome to On the Air. With me tonight is James R. Bennett. James, how are you tonight?
How do you do?
You're with the University of Arkansas. You're an English professor.
Indeed.
And one of your fields, one of the things you're interested in is media manipulation. But before we get to that, could we talk a little bit about you?
Well, I'll just mention about the media manipulation that I'm interested in at the university. About 15 or 20 years ago, I started a course called Language and Public Policy, which is about the corporate state. It's about the power of great powers to control what we see and hear and understand.
You say
in the
great
United
powers?
States. Great powers.
Okay.
Great powers.
Okay.
Corporations in the United States government, in
Yes,
the corporate
yes.
state. But I want to tell a story that my granddaughter and I have a game we play. When we detect that the other person is telling a fib, a whopper, or even exaggerating something, then we call out, "The nose is growing." And of course it's the Pinocchio effect, and sometimes the nose will extend so rapidly it will bang on the wall across the room. And we've been doing that ever since she was 6 months old. Can you see the nose hitting you, Roger, over there? Well, we have many, many lies and exaggerations and falsehoods and manipulations in our media. I haven't told my granddaughter yet just how much more complicated is the manipulation through secrecy and censorship, but particularly what we're here to discuss tonight is commercialism.
Yeah.
I thought it might be interesting to the audience, though, to know a little bit about why I would be concerned about commercialism. Because I'm an English professor, I was hired here to teach 19th century British literature. What am I doing here tonight? Worrying about advertising and marketing and the marketing system and Walmart and consumerism that we have in our country. Well, when I was just a little tiny child, maybe 6 months old, you see the nose, or as my granddaughter and I always say, nose. You could recognize that, I'm sure, because we love the Pink Panther movie. But when I was very young, I can't pinpoint it, the chapter from Matthew, from the Sermon on the Mount, struck me when I was sitting in church, that hypocrisy was something abhorrent in our Christian religion. So surely that is one of the earliest reasons why I began to be questioning and sensitive about our media and our leaders in politics, or anybody else for that matter, who would try to fill us up with a lot of hot air and cant. Literature, of course. I became an English professor. Literature, one of the major contents of literature is its analysis of discrepancies between what people say and what people do. Novel after novel after novel, thousands, tens of thousands of novels possibly, present us with characters in action who are saying one thing and doing another. And I think anyone who reads very much becomes sensitive and perceptive and apprehensive about that element in life. And so we are prepared. Anyone perhaps who reads is prepared to examine the media. Our journalism, our journalists, our good journalists, I guess we should say, and maybe I was talking about good novels a moment ago, good poetry, good drama. Our good journalists are persons who care about truth-telling, discovering the truth, bringing to themselves and to others a sense of reality that you and I perhaps feel deprived of, given the commercialization of the exploitation of reality that we have in our media so often. So religion, literature, journalism, these are major influences and interests in my life which I have studied and which have affected me and prepared and this is the determinism of my life that has brought me here tonight. Academic freedom at the University of Arkansas and in the United States is another great influence. I should emphasize, I have a unique privilege of being able to say what I believe to be true, whether I even adduce evidence or not. What I believe to be true, I can say at the University of Arkansas, and I am allowed to do that, and I cannot be fired for expressing my opinion. So that tradition, there's another tradition, religion, literature, journalism, academic freedom. The First Amendment, I should add, the powerful concept of the First Amendment that speech is protected in the United States, and it is protected in ways that are unknown throughout the world. So with this background and with my game with my granddaughter, I come here interested and eager to talk to you about the media in America and about reality. I have something to read, but you may have a question
go ahead.
As we're going along.
Yeah.
That has to do with the Pinocchio effect. Actually, and watch my nose as I tell you this, that I'm trying to develop a device for television so that whenever a lie or even the slightest exaggeration appears on television, an image of a nose will begin to appear on the speaker on the television screen. I think this would be of great public benefit.
I think everybody would look like Cyrano de Bergerac.
That's exactly right. The entire screen would be full of noses.
Yes, it would.
In studying one, by the way, I'm reading from a magazine called Adbusters, which is produced in Vancouver, Washington. And its entire purpose is to expose and to refute and to try to alter the commercial basis of our North American society, and especially to attack advertising. Here's an article by George Gerbner, a great American critic of television and of the media. In studying 1,600 primetime American programs over 15 years, certain patterns have been revealed. Heavy television watchers, those watching more than 4 hours a day, about 30% of the population, are receiving a grossly distorted picture of the real world that they tend to accept more readily than reality itself. Living with television means growing up in a vivid and compelling world in which men outnumber women at least 3 to 1. Men on TV have a vast variety of roles, but women are usually lovers or mothers. Women are younger than the men they deal with, and less than 20% of the women with children work outside the home, as compared with more than 50% in real life. I won't read any more of the entire page. Has to do with examples of the Pinocchio effect of television, the pervasive and systematic distortion of reality that our children grow up with. I read recently that the average child at graduate from high school will have seen 1,000 hours of television, will have seen 350,000 commercials, advertisements on TV.
Do you think
by
at
the
this
time
point
they
where
graduate?
people, where I guess they can't tell the reality, they can't tell that they're being fed a line of bull, or?
Well, it is true in my classrooms that my students draw their analogies. Their reality system then, their referential system, is very much from television. Whereas I might draw from the Holocaust. Of course, it's different generations, but I might draw from historical events. I think, generally that they draw from television.
I probably even more so than, I guess, even 20 or 30 years ago.
Surely. If they're spending 4 hours a day watching television, that's about average now.
Yeah.
And even though they're in college, so that this is a pervasive influence in their lives.
Would you say that then the images coming across on television today are different than they were a generation ago?
No.
So, I mean, there's always been a certain degree of manipulation, hasn't there?
Sure, surely. And in all of our media from the beginning, radio before that, and in our magazines and our newspapers before that. So I don't see a drastic change or development, but someone who studies TV particularly might see a gradation and a development that I haven't seen.
Do you think maybe there's less discernment now of reality, or less discernment that they're being deluded?
It does seem. Now that's a difficult question, Richard. I really can't answer that. I would have to make a concentrated comparison of perception before, and we didn't have the studies before. You see. So. That's difficult. Now, if someone is making a study now and then replicates that 10 years from now, then we'll begin to have the evidence of evolution of perception. But one might feel that the answer to your question is yes, because watching television is so pervasive, and so that their sense of the news is sound bites.
Yeah.
That's what our children are thinking that news is just a snap, and that this is depth, and that this is understanding.
Yes, and how can people make decisions
without some understanding, which comes from knowledge? We might assume. So we might guess that that the average young persons, or all the rest of us, our ability to understand what's going on in our nation, in our politics, and to get back more toward our subject, incorporations which control would be weak, would be minimal. That's what I would assume.
Yeah.
Well, if our nation is a nation of commercialism, which I have alleged several times, then it is at the same time a nation of consumerism. And if this consumerism is a problem, then one has a right to ask, why is it a problem? Why do we worry about consumerism?
Yeah, why do we worry about it?
I was out at Walmart today, and there was a horde of people there. The parking lot was full, and there were people pushing their carts all over Walmart, and I wondered why it was that we had to worry about consumerism. This is good. People have their goods and their accumulations and their things. Why can't we rejoice in that in a world in which people are deprived of so much?
More people are unemployed, and so I guess in a way they're buying things and keeping people working.
Yes,
yeah.
You could say that would be the value. So let's go about this in a different direction, and try to remember as we're shopping at Walmart just how enormously unequal is the source of information and the control of information in modern nations like the United States today. A scholar named Ben Bagdikian has been studying the gradual monopolization of media in the United States over the last 20 years. And he's published 4 copies of his book, 4 editions, I mean, of his book, Media Monopoly. And each time we see the media concentrated in fewer and fewer media. And soon it will possibly be maybe a half dozen. It's getting close to a dozen right now owning the media in the United States. So in the first place...
Now when we say media, we're talking about like television, newspapers?
Television, newspapers,
radio.
Talking about everything, because these are conglomerate media companies, and they're buying a variety of media. But they're also buying food companies, and Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds are involved in highly diverse, they're conglomerate companies, which gives them, of course, a great deal of power in that way. So we start out then with an unequal commodity commercial media system in which the power is concentrated in a few persons. So that'd be the first thing that I would say about why we need to be thoughtful about consuming, is because that consuming is fueling an anti-democratic structure in our country that should worry any thoughtful citizen. The sources of our information come from people who have a very special interest in life, and that interest is not the public good, but profit. And so that if we're concerned about the public good, then we need to be anxious about this concentration of media power in the hands of a few persons.
So they have a vested interest in presenting a certain point of view.
They have a vested interest in manipulation and distortion for their own purpose, which is profit for their stockholders. This concentration of wealth has then enormous ramifications that are anti-democratic in other ways than simply being unequal in information. It concentrates money, for one thing, and just last week, the Frontline program on PBS exposed how much that money controls, directs both parties of the United States. It showed President Clinton and it showed Senator Doe receiving contributions from wealthy individuals such as Mr. Andreas, who is the president of Archer Midland Daniel, that's not quite ADM, Archer Daniel Midland Corporation. And then laws were changed. New laws were made as a result of his enormous contributions of $350,000 here, $100,000 there. It goes to both parties. He gives to both parties.
Now, these laws were changed to benefit his company.
To benefit his company. Yes, this was exposed there. So we have the consuming nation that we have fuels an unequal information system and fuels a bribery system, a system of corruption of our politics. I haven't even begun to discuss the spiritual consequences on the individual consumed with consuming. I think most people are familiar with that. What is less familiar is what I'm talking about, is the connection, is the link between a consuming nation and the concentration of wealth that corrupts politics and corrupts the media, corrupts our news sources. If you combine that with secrecy, which is, of course, rampant in government, but it's also a familiar aspect, a fundamental basis of corporate life. If you combine that with censorship, corporations are constantly censoring, perhaps not so much directly anymore, because people who are hired understand what the rules of the game are. Therefore, self-censorship is the rule. Self-censorship is universal, and it's difficult to prove because that's the whole point.
And nobody's going to own up to it.
No one will admit it anywhere. However, in books that are being published, there are enough whistleblowers, there are enough people with good conscience, there are enough investigative journalists who in book after book have exposed the nauseating degree of self-censorship, the timidity of our media in telling the truth.
Now, here's a situation. Since so many publishing houses are owned by more of these conglomerates, do you think there may come a time when you won't see these books anymore exposing?
That's a very good question, Richard, because so far the book publishers have been the last bastion of truth-telling in our nation. The magazines and the newspapers, by and large, are controlled by the advertisers, by the sponsor, and by the money that they have to make from the advertiser. But the book publishers have been more independent, have had a tradition. The great companies like Knopf have had a tradition of publishing some books that are unpopular or might not sell many copies, but they feel that that's a public service that a book company should do.
Even that's kind of changing now, though.
And I agree with you. I agree with you. More and more, the publishing companies are publishing books with the bottom line already in their eye. I think it is increasing that this is happening. The book companies are becoming, as you just mentioned, more and more purchased by conglomerates who have food companies. They have they're part of the military-industrial complex. They, as we see in General Electric, for example, owning NBC. And so I fear this. I fear that the commercialization of our country will gradually even capture the book publishers of America even more than they have. Some of the greatest companies in our country have gone under.
Yeah.
And now they're more owned by the companies that play to the big book companies, Walden and others that we have here in Fayetteville.
Well, certainly with the big chains too, there's less of a chance of getting the books by the smaller companies, the independents.
Exactly, because the large companies will sell only printings of 20,000.
Yeah.
So, although we do have a great and healthy marginal book publishing press in America and a magazine press in America, it's marginal. Very few people see it. Very few people see Frontline. Just a handful of people see Frontline.
That's true.
Very few persons read The Nation magazine, let's say, or read some of the unknown presses. One press in Maine is called Common Courage, and they have great courage.
Or very few people relatively know about Adbusters.
Our Adbusters magazine is probably unknown in the United States, although there are two of us here in Fayetteville who have the magazine.
That's true. You and someone here at the station.
Mm-hmm.
So
what we have is, instead of the myth of the marketplace of ideas in our country that we're always congratulating ourselves and beating ourselves on the breast about, we're number one in the marketplace of ideas, we have more a consciousness industry that is being exposed and is familiar to people who study the industry.
Yeah.
That industry, that systematic attempt to dominate the way people see reality in the United States in ways that will favor companies desiring to make money is something that I speak to all parents and all school teachers, that we must struggle much harder than we ever have before to inform our children about. And I think we can do that, as I talked with my granddaughter when she was maybe not 6 months old, but when she was able to understand anything, we began to play the Pinocchio game, and whenever we watched television together, she must endure a running monologue about the noses that are growing.
Yes. You told me during break that you had a little story you wanted to tell.
Yes, I do. I want to tell about the Nestle Corporation, which is an international firm which owns Nescafe, Taster's Choice, Nestea, Nestle's Candy Bars, Carnation, Libby's Canned Foods, Stouffer's Frozen Dinners, and many other companies. It distributed free formula baby food to third world clinics and hospitals, encouraging mothers to forego breastfeeding and instead rely on the marketed formula, a practice directly linked to malnutrition and high third world infant mortality rates. A boycott developed around the world to try to persuade Nestle to stop doing that destructive, profit-oriented activity. The public relations response by the Nestle Corporation was to hire a company called Ogilvy and Mather, which is a New York public relations firm. And they recommended a proactive neutralization of the opponents of Nestle and of the boycotters. Nestle's recommendations regarding the infant formula boycott advised a strategy of neutralizing or defusing the issue by working quietly with key interest groups. Number one strategy then, to not cease manipulating and urging this destructive formula onto third world women, but was rather how to circumvent the boycott. That was their first move, recommended by their public relations agency, Ogilvy and Mather. The second second strategy to deal with the boycotters was an early warning system through which Nestle gains awareness of actions planned and is equipped to take appropriate proactive or reactive steps. That was grassroots monitoring, which would be a euphemistic way of putting it, or you would call it counterintelligence against their opponents.
Yeah.
They put the boycotters under surveillance to try to undercut them. Their third strategy was to avoid being interviewed by the media, by any newsman, because the media have the potential to exacerbate the issue and create much greater awareness than desired by the corporation. And fourth, their fourth strategy of dealing with the truth tellers about their criminal behavior toward third world women was to inoculate their company Carnation from this criticism of Nestle International. Carnation was the subsidiary that markets infant formula in the United States and Canada. And the way that they were to inoculate Carnation from criticism was by establishing a positive, do-good public service campaign on behalf of Carnation, just like our first ladies in the White House have been coached by public relations firms to be just say no.
Yes.
Barbara Bush had her campaign, and so on. Carnation was treated in a similar way by the routine public relations program. They first suggested the Carnation Literacy Library, but that was rejected because Barbara Bush was already working on, that was her public relations ploy.
Might have too many people learning how to read.
Right, yes. Then they suggested the motto, Carnation combats cocaine, but that was too negative. Then Carnation Racial Awareness Program, but that was rejected because of potential media criticism regarding South African investments by Nestle.
Oh, can't do that. Can't do that.
And because they were pushing their formula in South Africa.
Right.
So the public relations firm dropped that. Finally, they hit on Carnation Care.
Carnation Care?
Carnation Care, a foster care fund for HIV-infected children and infants. That was to be their campaign to nullify the boycotters. However, this campaign was leaked to the press by a whistleblower inside Nestle. So the whole Ogilvy Mather campaign was nullified.
How can people justify coming up with strategies like that?
Well, they're
morally.
They're making money, and morality doesn't have anything at all to do with it. It doesn't enter into the subject at all. It doesn't enter into the operation at all.
Yeah.
This is capitalist commercialism, and the purpose is to make money.
And that's
Now,
a book called Sultans of Sleaze.
This is a book called Sultans of Sleaze, the public relations and the media, and it's a collection of case studies like the Nestle case study. It's just one horror of corruption after the other.
Do you know if that book's currently available anywhere?
Yes, it's in the library
Okay.
at the University of Arkansas. And Adbusters is in the University of Arkansas, too.
And I think you can pick it up in area bookstores, too, Adbusters.
Can you? I
think I've seen it.
I didn't know that.
I think I've seen it at B. Dalton's. I mean, you know, don't embarrass the people at B. Dalton's by asking for a magazine that's not there, but I think I've seen it there.
Well, let's see now. Here we go. We thought we might talk a bit about solutions to sleaze of public relations.
Well, before we talk about the solutions, why don't we talk a little bit about Adbusters themselves? And they've come out with a series of commercials, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Or I guess would they be anti?
It's called anti-ads.
Anti-ads.
Right. And I think one is on the back of this magazine here.
Oh, that's great.
And on the back of every issue of Adbusters is their parody of the vodka company.
Yeah.
Absolute.
Yeah.
And so here is an ad that says Absolute End. And it's the chalk drawing of a bottle human imagined dead on the pavement. Absolute. It is the name of the company is Absolute,
yes, it is.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Absolute
Vodka.
Absolute Vodka. They threatened the magazine with a suit, said it was libelous. And the magazine, which is poor, it's just a marginal magazine. They don't have a lot of money to fight a big corporation like that, but they dared them and said they would fight. And they were, of course, in the right. This was protected speech.
Parody is, yeah.
Parody satire is still, so far, has been protected.
So far. I think they did one on Cool cigarettes, and they called it Fool, I think. Somebody with
is that one of them?
I think I saw that
yes.
one too, yeah.
And one of their anti-ads is a film of a pig, of the United States as a pig, gorging itself.
American Excess. American Excess. And they done a classic with a car, with a junkyard, a dinosaur in a junkyard rising up and saying, "Coming soon, the end of the age of the automobile." In fact, we're going to show you some of those Adbusters commercials right now, and you can see what, on here on Public Access, what most stations in America won't show you. So, stay tuned.
A tiny 5% of the people in the world consume 1/3 of its resources and produce almost half the non-organic waste. Those people are us. Nothing is destroying this planet faster than the way we North Americans live. the most significant event in automotive history. It's coming. The end of the age of the automobile.
Your living room is the factory. The product being manufactured is you. For years, people have defined the economic health of a country by its gross national product. The trouble is that every time a forest falls, the GNP goes up. With every oil spill, the GNP goes up. Every time a new cancer patient is diagnosed, the GNP goes up. If we are to save ourselves, economists must learn to subtract.
Okay, hi, we're back. We hope you enjoyed those commercials. And to finish up, Dick, we want to talk about, I guess, some solutions to this problem.
Some
of media
solutions
manipulation.
to public relations industry and lying and manipulation and spying and corporate corruption and just lying in general, saturation, lying in general. What reforms might we employ to decommercialize somewhat our nation? We're not going to change the structure of the system, but we might modify it in some ways so that this might be a more humane country, more spiritual country. The first thing I'd recommend would be for people to read, to get books and magazines and read. My students know almost nothing about corporate structure and corporate behavior in the United States. They know almost nothing about any of the magazines that I subscribe to.
Now, what would you recommend that people read then?
Well, if I might just mention, I have 2 bibliographies that list over 5,000 books and articles and books on the subject. One is called Control of the Media in the United States, and the other is called Control of Information in the United States. Were you referring to specific magazines and
specific magazines or books they might seek out? Yeah.
I have already mentioned Ben Bagdikian's Media Monopoly, which is very good. I brought this brand new book called Marketing Madness, which is an excellent book. It's subtitled A Survival Guide for a Consumer Society by the authors Jacobson and Mazur. And this is very readable. It's clear. It's forceful. I much recommend this book. I recommend all of us encouraging investigative journalism. The Investigative Journalists and Editors Organization and their magazine, IRE, is both of these organizations are doing great service to the United States in training journalists in how to do investigations. Where do you find your sources? How do you follow up and pursue? How do you get beneath the surface of corporations and the government in the United States? This organization, Investigative Reporters and Editors, is based at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. I would urge all of us to encourage whistleblowers. But of course, you and I can't encourage individual whistleblowers and protect them.
No.
So what we need to do is to encourage our congressmen to pass stronger and better laws to protect whistleblowers. They are some of the greatest heroes in America today who have the guts to tell about the corruption in government and in corporations and in the corporate state today. It's difficult to be a whistleblower. We had one recently here on campus, a pharmacist who told the truth about the athletic program. And we had the Arkansas Democrat who followed up on the story and did the investigation, not the local newspapers, but the Little Rock newspaper. That whistleblower had a great deal of grief over that. I would urge us all to educate ourselves, educate our children, urge journalists to be educated about the power of money in our society. We are underestimating this. It's not exposed. I ask you to look at any one of the daily newspaper you're reading and look day after day how often is the exertion of this money against our democracy exposed. And I guarantee you, you won't find it very often. The Statement of Ethics by the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, doesn't even mention corporations. It's a weak statement as far as the power base and the power base for corruption in our country is concerned. However, there is an international journalist's statement of ethics or statement of principles called the Sydney Declaration. And the Sydney Declaration has a considerable paragraph about how corporations are corrupting and subverting newsmaking around the world. I would urge us all to support alternative journalism such as this, as community access television, such as the Ozark Gazette. I'm giving Richard Drake a plug here tonight, but he certainly is a leader in creating and promoting and sustaining alternative journalism.
Thank you.
We have a glorious, it's a wonderful part of our nation. We have thousands of alternative magazines, newsletters, and broadcasting companies. They don't have a great audience. It's not very large. It's not like the mainstream, but it is there. It is possible to get the truth in the United States if one searches for it. It's possible to get the truth from a good newspaper if one reads it from cover to cover every day and makes notes. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette will inform you, because they do have reports about the corruption of power in the United States. But it may be on the back pages, and it may be a small article. It may not even be more than 2 or 3 lines.
But it's in there.
But it's there if you will have the patience to put it together. But you have to make notes and you have to do some filing to get the big picture. The way a newspaper and the way our news media present the news, it's so scattered. It's so fragmentary. One has to really focus one's mind and one's life to get the truth out of it, because you have to put the strands and the scraps of information together. I urge everyone to do your own investigating and your own reporting, just as is done here at Community Access, as Ozark Gazette is doing. A retired gentleman named Bill Nigut, N-I-G-U-T, single-handedly published the Chicago Media Critic year after year. He gathered all the information and he stapled them, and he printed it and he stapled it, and he and his daughter and granddaughter mailed it. And what he did simply was he read the newspapers and the magazines carefully, and he put the stories together to show what was happening in the United States, and he's a hero. In Cleveland, another man is doing the same thing and has been doing this for years. It isn't necessary to be a part of a big organization. It isn't necessary to have a secretary.
Maybe it's an advantage not to be part of a big organization.
Yes, because there you're controlled, and there are all the pressures in a big organization to conform. I see that at the university. The University of Arkansas is a very quiet and timid place. There's almost no one who speaks out in any way that steps too far out of the middle of the road. It's really a generating machine of the status quo over there, and any big bureaucracy, I suppose, has the same influence. I've been talking about modes of reform that don't get at the structure of media in the United States. We can do all of these reforms, and I advocate them and I urge it, but I would like to see some structural changes made also. And so I want to talk for a moment, if we still have time.
We have a little few minutes, yeah.
About changing the tax structure. It will be through the taxes that we might really strike at the corruption of information, the manipulation of information in the United States by the commercial powers who have the advertising, who are the sponsors. The first thing I think should be done is to eliminate the tax deduction for advertising.
Yeah.
That would generate $35 billion a year in this nation. $35 billion alone just from the elimination of tax deduction. Then I would tax advertising, and I would tax advertising progressively. The biggest advertiser would be taxed more heavily. The smaller advertiser would be taxed less. That would encourage then the smaller companies over these monopolizing companies. I don't know if I said this before, but we have virtually an oligopoly in the United States. Monopoly is not, that's just one control, one center. Technically speaking, the United States is an oligopoly of power, and we need to strike at that. We need to control that, constrain that, and restrain it, and decrease that power in every way that we can.
Before we can't.
Before we cannot.
Control, yeah.
Before we cannot. If we taxed it and taxed it in that progressive way, the third thing I would do would be to take that money and give it to the media to increase readers. They would perhaps lose some revenue. Let us then increase the number of readers, which would increase revenue.
Yeah.
But subsidize the readers.
Yes.
It seems to me that this is not an original idea of mine. These are ideas advocated by thoughtful people, published in books and in articles around the United States. And that way we would actually be changing the structure of American capitalism, the way it actually behaves, and in a significant way, because we would be reducing its control over our information sources.
As it is, I think we exist to sustain capitalism. Capitalism doesn't sustain us. We exist to sustain capitalism, to serve its ends.
Yes, and that's why I began with the question, why is it we should be concerned about consuming?
Yes.
Because it all feeds back into this power, which then is employed to coerce us to go out and consume more.
That's right.
Because it's almost a coercive system.
Buying things we don't need.
Yeah.
Or really don't even want.
Exactly. Useless things that we don't even want.
Yes.
Yes, that's good. Impulse buying is there.
Has been praised heavily.
Yes. Well, that would be a major structural change. I might suggest one or two more structural changes.
Sure, very briefly.
In Luxembourg, the television is divided into four. National television is divided into four. It's paid for by the federal government of Luxembourg, and it's called Spectra television there. That is, the four television programs represent four different political views. They have conservative and reactionary and radical and what am I leaving out? Socialist and capitalist. Four distinct political points of view are represented. Whereas in our country, we tend to have the Democratic-Republican Party combination. There's the present bill that they're fighting over, our budget bill, I mean, is not that different. As President Clinton has said, we're really not that different. It's just a few $1 billion different.
Yeah.
He is saying the same thing. We want to curtail the budget. We want to reduce services to people. Both are saying that in 7 years. So it's not that different. But in Luxembourg, they have a socialist point of view. They also have a a rightist point of view, so that people can actually see and hear crystallized what these different points of view are, so that they can make a choice about it. And it seems to me that that would be a help. Now, this may be very a long way down the road.
Probably quite a bit, quite a bit down the road.
I would eliminate all postal rates for small publications. All the marginal journals and newspapers from which we receive independent discoveries, independent opinions. I would encourage them by making it easy for them to mail their publications and disseminate their publications. Contrary to that, our government is doing the exact opposite of raising the postal rates for our newspapers and magazines.
That's no accident.
No,
That's no accident
no,
at
it's
all.
not. It does repress oppositional
Yes,
points
exactly.
Points of view. It's a curtailing, a censorship of views in the nation. In my mind, economic censorship.
Exactly. Well, Dick, my director is signaling me wildly. I guess our time is up. So I want to thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll be back next week.
Hi, I'm Candy Clark, Justice of the Peace, District 12 in Washington County, and I'm on public access. Nope. So are you.
Right swipe, right swipe. He's cuddling a kitten. Oh, wait a minute. Oh. Left swipe.
You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left.
Came across a photo of this green-eyed hottie. Whole nine, pretty face, tight waist, nice body. And I just couldn't overlook one small fact. She smokes like an old man at a racetrack.
You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left. You gotta swipe it left.
Hashtag. Hi, the disquieting news came this week that TLC is dropping 19 and counting, starring the infamous Duggar family. Not to worry though, because Josh Duggar is now free to join the cast of Naked and Afraid. Be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
In this particular poem, I'm speaking to my mother, and the poem is called Killing the Saint. Your father, my grandfather, the saint. The parts of his body are taking back their names. Once you said yes, maybe he also forced my brother, maybe he forced me. But now again you don't remember. I didn't say that, you tell me tonight. I never said that. Flashes of mirror pinning wet clothes to a line in moonlight. Fear. Mother, you are larger now. Awkward, we split. The mirror goes. A year passes and another. We don't talk about these things. We who are so close don't say these things without a neat period. Sufficient comments. Then one day I use the hard-won memory, sit before you, and begin. You say the right thing. It has taken me years to understand your answers are often that. Words speaking to themselves, words moving in unison, put a good face forward. Everyone claps. Mother, when your demons loom and you become larger than life, my children grow small on that horizon. As you pull, I lose them, one by one. Or is it me I lose? Or is it me I fear to lose? In this poem, I hold your eyes and shout, please, Mother, don't say the words you think we want. Speak from your own fear. Look, I am bringing my children back, circling their size, killing the saint in his 30 years of death, touching the rotten flesh in moonlight, watching the pillars fall, retrieving their pieces.
Politics in general and jobs that don't pay enough, 40-hour work weeks, books full of boring stuff, schools that should teach but kids don't learn a thing. These are a few of my least favorite things. Healthcare that won't heal and how people treat the earth, paying tolls and taxes, disbelief in self-worth, bitter cold winters that cut into spring. These are a few of my least favorite things. Religions that claim they're true, don't get me started. Standards that double and people cold-hearted. Judgment and bias when freedom don't ring. These are a few of my least favorite things. All the lying, all the killing. When I'm depressed and sad, I add that to all of my least favorite things, and then I feel really bad. Feel like Julie Andrews or something.